All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Katie Room from Periapsis Press, and today I have a big indie author stream with some of the authors and creators behind the Swords and Maidens anthology, which is a sci-fi fantasy heroic short story anthology. Really great stuff. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thank you.
Let's just go I say go around, but like you guys don't necessarily have the same screen I do.
We can go in alphabetical order.
We certainly could. Yeah. By last name?
Yes.
I think that puts Blake in first.
No pressure there.
Can you just share like who you are, what book in the anthology you did, and then maybe a little bit about other works that you've got?
Sure. My name's Blake Carpenter. I had the honor and I guess privilege to contribute the story called Three Swords for the anthology. In regards to other work, I have a book that just came out maybe a month ago called Deathbringer, which a certain Michael Gallagher was nice enough to offer editing and other advice for its story. About 10 years or so it took me to write and to finish after a bunch of different incarnations and versions and such things.
Awesome.
Which story did you write, Blake?
I wrote Three Swords in the anthology. I'm pretty sure that was the name of it. I'm, of course, drawing a blank because I'm here under the gun first, but I think that was the name of it.
Oh, that is correct.
If I got that wrong. Yeah, that's me. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Don't worry, if anybody's got any questions, I've got a quick reference.
I do as well.
There
you go.
Show off.
My name's Michael Gallagher. I published my debut novel, Body and Blood, last year. It's a cyberpunk horror action novel about two demon fighting priests. I also have a number of short stories that have been published in last winter's issue of Kursova, in another anthology from Crucifixion Press called Shoot the Devil, and of course I also authored the story The Shrouded Tower in Swords and Maidens.
Despite appearances, I do not go next because I'm here under false pretenses. I am not the wonderful authoress El Jaji Lampletter, so I believe Ms. LaPointe is next.
Yes. Yes. I'm N.R. LaPointe. I edited the anthology. My contributed story was simply entitled Azrael, after the main character. My other works include the Raven Mist Creek series, the first book of which is Chalk, which is about a Catholic schoolgirl that fights Lovecraftian horrors. Most recent novel is Gun Magus, which was kind of an off-the-wall isekai sort of story, influenced a lot by 80s action films.
Cool. So waiting to make sure you're done.
Sorry.
I'm TJ
Just
Marquis.
say over when you're done speaking on the radio.
Yeah. And my latest release was Bloodbane, which Katie was cool enough to review. That is a pulpy light RPG, I call it, modeled after Castlevania and a little bit of Metroidvania type tropes in it, things like that. It was fun. That's the latest thing. My core series is Heroes Metal right now. That's kind of the focus. Working on number 3. And that's just more pulpy, heavy metal inspired stuff. Having fun and, just rocking out with the themes and all that kind of stuff. Story in this anthology was Wings of Ether. And just kind of wanted to showcase more of the stuff that I like to do.
My name is John C. Wright. I am responsible for a story. Now I'm going to embarrass myself with my senility because I can't remember the title of it. I think it's called Fantasy Harem in Another World, which I put into the anthology because I wanted to write a story that was very much about the right and wrong of. Please don't pull on that. very much about the right and wrong of chivalry and what you should do to protect rather than exploit maidens in some fantasy background where the men have swords and the women don't. I am most famous for being nominated for 6 Hugo Awards in 1 year, more than any other individual, and losing all of them. So I'm the big Hugo loser. And I have 3 ongoing projects which I have not finished yet. So I'm also famous for my famous unfinished work. One is called Somewhither, which is a alternate history romp. One is called Moth and Cobweb, which is a fairy tale set in the modern age. And I'm currently working on a book called Star Quest, which I haven't released any of yet, though I've written 8 books of it. I'm hope to get more done before I release the first one. Star Quest is my attempt to rewrite what Star Wars should have been like if they had asked me to write it rather than the people they did ask. So those are the projects I'm working on.
Awesome. Okay. To sort of start us off on talking about the anthology. You guys have an echo, or was that just me?
I hear it.
No, I hear it
That was
too.
Blake for a second.
I don't know how to fix that kind of thing anyway. I'll just act like I'm doing something.
I'm getting an old laptop. I'm just going to have to keep it muted. Apologies.
Oh, okay. Let's start with LaPointe. Since you put this together, can you talk about like what your vision was and why you picked the stories that you did?
Oh goodness. Well, the vision in general was I just got in my head of trying to pick up where after Silver Empire collapsed. So I loved Silver Empire. They were putting out 5-star books left and right, and I felt it as kind of a blow to indie publishing when they were no longer doing that. So I just like trying to figure out, where do we go next? And the idea of doing an anthology popped into my head. So I had some conversations with a few friends like Declan Fenn and Mrs. Wright, the LJ Lamplighter. And I threw out the title actually about, I want to say over a year ago now, in a conversation with her, and she simply said, "Well, that might make some money." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So I took that as a massive form of encouragement and started mulling over like how to go about it. And I eventually started tapping people that I knew and really liked their work to start contributing. So it just kind of slowly came together.
Awesome.
And I was able to get into the anthology because I'm her husband, not because I was married. By the way, her first name is pronounced Jaji, not Jaggy. The G is
okay.
So none of you have ever heard her name pronounced. That's the way I pronounce it.
Okay.
Yeah, I always wonder. It's good to know.
Say it again. I'm going to write it down phonetically.
Well, the hard G and the soft G are written with the same letter in English. Most people can write it phonetically. I pronounce it Jaji, but my wife, you'll have to ask her when she comes on how she really pronounces. So you're not going to get a straight answer from me because I'm a writer. I make up things for you.
I think that's how David pronounced it, and I was like, yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I tell people the L is silent when you're pronouncing her name. It's a silent L.
I pronounce so many words incorrectly. I know.
But not lieutenant, so you pronounce that one correctly. But, I'm kidding. Her name's actually 50 Jaji Lamplighter. That's a Roman numeral. The other 49 Jajis did not work out, and she was the production model. Everything I say is true.
TJ, why don't we hop over to you since you will not be on super long.
Yeah, sure.
Back out soon. Can you talk a little bit about how you responded to the prompt?
Well, I was humbled when he contacted me about joining in, especially when I saw the roster. Because, pretty much everyone I've read prior to this, and yeah, so I knew how good y'all were, and just thinking, cool, awesome. So What was the second part of the question? Sorry, I got on that.
Can you talk about how your story approaches
Yeah.
the heroic
the heroism, right?
theme?
Okay,
Yeah.
So really, the first thing I actually started with a bit of a misconception. I thought that that, and I don't know whether to say Nathan or Inar. I thought Nathan had in mind something with like I guess based heroic female heroes. And so what popped into my head was the idea of the kind of the first thing that popped in was a magical princess with kind of a Final Fantasy type vibe. And so that's why, you can see the things that stuck around from that, which is the high magic setting that almost looks like technology and way up off the ground. Do we even touch? Yeah, we touch it like toward the end, but pretty much everything is in the upper floors, and it's just, I don't know, I hope that vibe came across. That's kind of what I was wanting to channel.
Absolutely came across. They're
yeah.
huge.
Oh, yeah.
Vibes. Yeah.
Cool. Good. So then I read his prompt again and realized, oh wait, this is not the princess focused. We're saving the princess. So I mean, that's a pretty easy change because that's yeah, it's pretty straightforward to just say, okay, the dude's going to save the girl, and I just kind of wanted to keep it close to that and keep it simple. So I picked my strong hero and kind of the vibe I wanted for him, that sense of duty, and just rolled with it. Pretty much, other than the one little thing that I won't mention because it's kind of a surprise. It could be spoiled, I guess, if you think about it for a sec. But other than that, I really didn't plot or plan, just kind of free wrote and let it spin out.
I think I talked about this on the stream before. I don't remember in what context, but I really liked the scene where like your hero pulls a switch basically between like the dump truck and the motorcycle with his rival. I thought that was fantastic. Really reminded me of a lot of stuff like from Bloodbane and the second Heroes Metal book.
Heroes Metal, yeah.
Out of the Deep.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what I like.
What would you say your story brings sort of uniquely to the anthology?
I'd say probably I had the brightest tone overall. Maybe.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Definitely. Yeah.
Maybe I don't know whether to say Jaji or Lamplighter. Maybe hers was, I guess, probably the closest with kind of like the sweetness of it. But yeah, I'd say overall it was the brightest tone, and I think I can kind of see why Nathan decided to put it up front for that reason, which again was also, I don't know if that was it, but I kind of get the vibe and the flow of the whole thing.
It was definitely a good one to open the book with, I think.
Oh, I can't imagine opening it with any other story, actually. That one was just right into just the fun. As I've been saying, I think your story was probably one of the... I debate on if yours or Declan Finn's contribution were the most fun of the stories. And yeah, because like those two are just, you end up like laughing and smiling all throughout because they're just so bonkers.
Yeah, this was funny. But yeah, I mean, and that was humbling. And then you called it, Katie, simple, which I took as a compliment.
Oh yes.
And so yeah, I think that's a nice way to lead in. I think it worked.
Yeah, I think for me, it sort of set the foundation for the rest of the anthology. Kind of said, hey, this is going to be a straight player, right? Like we're not going to be subverting or undermining or emasculating. Like when we said Swords and Maidens, like it's heroism, and we're not going to be ashamed of that, you know? But yeah, I agree. it was a good one to start off on.
And the quality can only go up, right?
I think the stories in general had a very and I don't mean this disparagingly, like a universal quality to them. Like there wasn't any one that was like far and away way better or like way worse, you know, like they go pretty good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm thinking. Should we go to Michael next, since his story was next?
That would make sense.
Yeah. So right after TJ's really fun, hopeful, awesome story, the tempo immediately takes a nosedive with my, grimdark. Funny thing about my story was I'd never really written fantasy before. In fact, I questioned Nate's judgment thoroughly after he invited me on board, and had no idea what I was going to write. And wouldn't you know it, just that week I catch COVID.
Oh no.
Never told anybody about this. I caught COVID right around when I was writing this, Nate. And so I had to leave my house and go into a hotel for a week. And so I'm up in like this hotel somewhere, and I'm sleeping all day with fever dreams. And then I like wouldn't be able to sleep at night. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Plague Tower. Wait a minute. I think I've got my fantasy story here. So so I turned this in a half delirium, and luckily it kind of worked out. But
I think that comes through too in a good way.
yeah.
And
And
anyone else who wants to be inspired by the same muse as came to Michael Gallagher, he'll come by and cough on you and go into the same fever dreams that inspired him. He's willing to offer it as a additional.
I will lick your doorknobs for $100. But yeah, it's a big shift in tempo. My stuff, I think I just generally am more attracted to more ground level fantasy, as it were. You know, I don't think I've got the stuff, frankly, to be so conceptually high minded as a guy like TJ or John or a lot of my would be contemporaries. But I think it's something that's definitely different. One of the things that's really impressive about this book is you talked about the consistent quality, but what's really amazing is the variety with the consistent quality. I mean, Austin's got this kind of like almost Civil War era steampunk sort of magic to it. I mean, Blake will talk about his. It's amazing. I mean, it's really an impressive array of talent on display. And mine was kind of the brooding goth kid in the corner of the class, I guess, but it was still hopeful.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what you think makes it hopeful, even though the setting and sort of the tone is very dark?
I think at the core of any tale of heroism has to be sacrifice. Really, there's got to be the selflessness, and without giving too much away, it's a redemption story, and you've got this fallen knight who's been degraded from his order. Still, overcomes his guilt and his past sins, and he fights through the dourness and the sadness and everything to try to right what he wronged in his life, even though it really does seem like there's a point where it seems like it's really too late, but he keeps fighting. I mean, I think that's heroism, really when you boil it down to its core.
Sure.
I thought it was really interesting. I don't think any of the other stories really did this, where you approached the hero as a sort of like a post-Paragon type, right? Like
Yeah.
the sort of sword-focused subgenre of fantasy tends to be very populated with sort of flat arc paragon types, right?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the stories reflected that.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way, obviously. I think they're all great, but because you took a different route with it, we get sort of a different aspect, different characteristics that contribute to what makes a hero.
Yeah.
Slightly different, like repentance,
Mhm.
like in
Yeah.
a sort of personal way,
Sure.
and overcoming yourself as opposed to
Mhm.
just your excuse me, your external antagonist, right?
Yeah, you
For-
actually mentioned that in the write-up. You mentioned my story. That was very kind of you. Thank you. Where he has to face the temptation to abandon his quest. Yeah, and in the hands of a lot of people, I won't name. I think we all know who I'm talking about. Would just kind of say, yeah, go do that, and that's what would be realistic, so to speak.
Mhm.
And who needs it?
right. I think it's awesome to have sort of a grimdark setting without saying we have to give in to despair.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
100% agree. Yeah.
So
Fun reads. Hey, I'll go ahead and bounce out real quick while we're in a transition point, and then
Yeah,
Hawk
sure.
can get in. Cool.
thank
PJ,
you,
it was great
thank
to
you so
meet you.
much
It's
for
good to see
coming.
y'all for a
See you,
couple
man.
minutes.
Thanks for coming.
Yep, I love being part of it.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming.
Hop over in the chat and see you there. Bye.
All right.
Sounds good.
That's good.
All right.
There were some funny things that came out of Mike's story. If you recall, Mike, the time I plugged in a lump of text from your story into an AI image generator, and it included the text about how the evil wizard had, I think, the magic ball that was the size of a cabbage,
Yeah.
and it pops out this picture of an evil wizard holding a big cabbage in front of him.
He didn't use that for the promotional art. I don't know why.
I should have.
Should have been the cover.
I'm going to use that for the next one, Swords and Cabbage, for the anthology that's coming out next.
Masters of Cabbage.
Cabs of Doom coming 2024.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hey there.
Thank you so much for coming.
Glad to be here. It's good to see everybody. I guess I haven't met most of you in person. John, I have, obviously.
Well, I'm known as L now, apparently.
Oh, you're apparently L.
Yeah, I'm trying to track down the Death Note guy, but no, this
It works for me. I'll just call you Jadji. Other Jad, whatever. Anyway,
Mr. Jadji, thank you very much.
Yeah, but yeah, it says Hawk for me. It looks like that's what I usually say. For here, it's only 9 o'clock. I just got the kid put down into bed, and so put her down. Gave the wife her. It's going to sound wrong. I cut an apple and peanut butter. I gave my wife her treat. I was going to say that, and it was going to sound wrong. And so I'm like, what time is it? Oh, 8:45. I've got plenty. Then I realized I had to deal with my work computer. And normally I'm on a VPN, and I've got 50 things running. And I have to get off of all of that because it will not bring up none of this. I tried that once before with a previous podcast, and my firewall is very good at blocking every single thing in a podcast. So I managed to clear it all out with 3 minutes to spare. I think I'm doing amazing. But I didn't hear what everybody else was talking about, so feel free to continue on or ask me questions.
Well, actually, your timing is impeccable. because we just did TJ's story and Michael's story, and yours is next in the anthology. So
Oh, it
do you
is.
want to
Yeah.
like just introduce yourself, like talk about maybe other works that you've done, and then talk about your story?
Okay. So, hey, look, it says my name. I pointed the wrong way. Hawk Austin, Hawk Kings Austin is on I put on the label. And I'm wearing a shirt older than most of the people viewing. It's the Alabama Renaissance Festival, which I don't even know if it still goes on. 2006. I used to run Renaissance festivals for fun and not profit.
Oh, cool.
I was the entertainment director. I did the sword fights, which is I studied sword fights a long time ago because I thought I needed to know sword fights to get into fantasy. Unfortunately, they're addictive, and I'm still doing sword fights. I've got a couple of series, and I'm not good at series. As Jaji will tell you, she had to really push me to get the third out in the Purity Wellman series. The first two books of that, which is Pure Poison and Immaculate Corpse, are actually one book that Jaji, in her infinite wisdom, chopped into pieces and made me rewrite. I was not. I did the first wrong thing, which is start at the beginning, outlining the entire giant plot that will be the entire of apparently several books, and then put in the little bit that's this story, and that's the wrong way to do it. Why? Because it's boring. And boring is the first sin of being an author. You can't do that. So Jaji chopped it into little bits and made me rewrite it. And Pure Poison, Immaculate Corpse is really those chunks that came out. And then Divine Dark is actually the one of the the only sequel I've ever really written. The Broken Man is another Irish fantasy novel, and it's set in the Bronze Age. And the Bone God has the same characters in the same world, and it's not a sequel. I'm working on the sequel, and I got an idea for a monster and wrote a great fire scene. And having that fire scene, I wrote the rest of the novel leading up to the fire scene and decided to publish it as the second in the series. But the second in the series is still on my computer, unfinished. And then Castle Brave is out. Is that it? That's might be it. Might be out. Let's see, 6. Yeah, that's 6. That's about it. I've got a few more that are sitting around on various publishers' slush piles that maybe someday will come to fruition. And then my story in this one was The Winged Horse.
Really enjoyed that story.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
What action?
Thank you. First off, the outline of the story is it's a wizard war, and the wizards create spaces in the mist where they have a war. Technically speaking, they could do away with war, build planets, and live happily ever after. Oddly enough, they have war. The villain of the piece, who doesn't show up at all, is the necromancer. And his actually, the villains don't show up at all. It is a story of armies hitting each other, and the villains' armies are apparent. They can do various magical tricks. The Catalan, she is capable of moving through time, and it is known to our hero that she is a menace, and he expects the worst. I don't give you any backstory. I'm kind of, I guess that's my normal, is I don't like telling people any backstory. So you kind of are thrust into this world where weird things happen, armies are fighting, and you have to figure out how to save the. She's not exactly a damsel in distress, but say the young lieutenant in distress. So it's a very simple plot. The reason it's a simple plot is because Mr. Lapointe is very good at telling me exactly what plot he wanted me to have. Very simple plot. And so I wrote that plot down on a sheet of paper. The second part of writing it was finding what world I was going to put it in. And for some reason, the Wizard War was wandering around in my head, and I decided to throw that in there. Everything else is just blatant luck that it just showed up on the page when I needed something in the story. I wish I had more to that. In fact, this is the fastest I've ever written a short story.
Oh, wow.
Because he asked for it like 6 months before, and I said sure, and I had plenty of time to write it, and I had that sticky note with exactly what I was going to write, and then he asked me about a month before it was due, and I was like, yeah, I've got it mostly finished. Pulled up the sticky note, looked at it again. It was kind of I've got to sit down this weekend and actually knock it out, and I did. And that's the first time that the words flowed when I wanted them to, which I assume for a professional author happens a lot more often than it does for me. I got I don't know if you guys have this same problem. Whenever you build a world, you end up writing 400 pages of backstory that no one will ever see, and you might as well just throw in the bin now. But it's lovely.
Only 400?
Maybe I'm a limited, But the funny thing is, there's this game called the Dresden Files. It's based on the TV show and the books, the Dresden Files. It is a tabletop role playing game where everybody brings something to the table, a piece of a world, something, and so it's a communal storytelling. And I was with some friends, and we developed this very broken steampunk world with very odd things in it. And for some reason, I decided I had to make it work in my mind, and so I built this entire universe that I never had any use for until this short story. And so I was really happy to actually dig around in the universe that I had built 12 years ago for a gaming set, and never got around to using.
You never know where inspiration's going to strike, do you?
I could show you if we share my screen. My computer's back files they're not all 400 pages. Some of them are 2-page little backstory bits. I can't get the artist thing to flow most days. So I have tricks, but one of my tricks is to pre-write chapters in this chapter, Roger and Ramon talk about love, computers, and the Empire. And so when I'm bored and I'm flipping through at work, I go, here's a scene I really want to write. And then I just start typing it. But that means I've got 6 stories with 20,000 words on them sitting in my to-do files that I just really need to have the conviction to open them up and do, including now, by the way, The Winged Horse is now 26,000 words and 5 chapters and a nice end piece that's not quite finished out. Someday it'll be 100,000 words and published, but currently it's not.
Cool.
Okay.
Would you talk a little bit about your approach to heroism in The Winged Horse?
So the overriding theme of The Winged Horse is duty. He has a responsibility to London that doesn't even exist anymore. He has a responsibility to the Duke, who he hasn't, he's been a serving soldier for over 100 years and possibly considerably before that, but the layered duty, which is more important than love. Duty is a piece of heroism. A soldier is not a perfect hero because he rarely can set aside. When a soldier crosses the lines to fight, it isn't heroism, it's duty. yes, there's an element that requires all the same things that are needed for a hero, but that passion, which is what fills in the end, where he becomes something other than a soldier to perform not duty but a rescue mission, a heroic action of the heart. This is a change in the character. It was his arc, essentially. I may not have expressed it properly in the short space that I had there, but that was his heroic arc. He went from a soldier doing his job to somebody who was out of not even love, but out of something more than just plain duty, decided to do something foolhardy and possibly fatal to save somebody he suddenly had feelings for. So there's a heroism is more than duty, but that's a core piece of it is the soldier mentality that you keep going. But then there's got to be, in my opinion, something greater. God, a woman, saving the world. You have to see something bigger than the next job. I'm reading a lovely series where a bunch of mobsters end up saving the world several times, more or less, not entirely by mistake. They come to that exact moment where they're going, I really ought to just take the money and leave. We're not going to do that, are we? Why are we not doing that again? We see something that's more important than cash, duty, and that to me is that heroic moment where a person gives it all away for love or something.
I think that arc came through. I thought it did anyway.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
I like what I write. I write it for me, and I'm so glad that other people might like it. It's unfortunately has to be a hobby because I make too much money in my day job. But luckily it's a hobby, so I get to write what I want and not print newspaper and write about whatever newspaper people write about.
Yeah.
It is nice having a day job. It is unfortunate having a day job sometimes.
If anybody listening has not read any of Hawk's work and they liked his story, it's a really good example of what he accomplishes tone-wise and generally being delightfully weird. Because I've read The Broken Man and Pure Poison, and they're both excellent and have a very similar, just it's a delightful weirdness to them.
And this from you, Chalk, delightfully weird. Okay, again, I don't have time to read most books. I wish Declan Finn. I loved the first couple of his books. Great. I'm not going to read the series. I don't have that kind of time in my life. It's not no marks on him. I read one book, two in a series, and then I'm like, that was great. Thank you. I'm just going to
tap out around 5. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, unless the Swan Knight. Okay, fine. I take the time to read John's books usually. I think I've read all of them. I probably have missed one or two somewhere, but most people, I just don't get the connection.
Swan Knight's not finished. There's still 6 more books I haven't written yet in that series. So.
Okay, well, maybe I won't.
You will find out who the hero's father is and where the Holy Grail's been hidden. So I have that written down. It's all made up. I just haven't written it yet.
Excellent. And John's something I can't do. In fact, I'm almost on the opposite. I had a paper in high school where I compared Paul Anderson to who wrote Gone with the Wind. But the description in Paul Anderson is instant Landry. What's that?
Margaret Mead wrote Gone with the Wind.
So but my descriptions are more like Paul Anderson's. He swept back his seal brown hair and adjusted his cape, which was slightly too short for official, tiny 2-line descriptions, whereas John has full pages of 400 objects, and you feel like they're all probably important, and it's opposite spectrum, but he's still very readable, and that the spirit of the story still feels like something that bonds with me.
I must hasten to point out that's only for stories of a certain type. When I wrote a story that was a sequel to an A. Van Vogt story, I wrote it in his mood and metaphor and used his method of description, which was also very curt and brief. Now, when I'm done reading E.R. Edison's The Worm Ouroboros or Milton, and I'm feeling really descriptive, that's when I try to describe with photographic exactness every detail of every fall of every dust mote in the sunbeam that's coming through the broken window into the castle, and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
But, blame the muse, not me.
I think your muse has that's the. I enjoy some stories so much, and I liked your Swan Knight. I started you with the Golden
Age.
The Golden Age stuff, and that was similar in description and weirdness. I loved how just crazy trying to figure out what was real and what was semi-real yet virtual, and what was not real because it was truly imaginary. There were layers upon layers in that story, and that was weird. The
Golden Age was written with the theory of throw the reader into the deep end of the pool without telling what's going on, and see if he can adjust quickly enough. And if you run short on something, make up a new word that doesn't mean anything. And
well,
similar to how Lewis Carroll wrote Jabberwocky, where you kind of know what the words mean, but not really.
It was and Slithy were the Borogroves and Mumrath's Outgrave. Yeah, right. There's excessive versions. Katie, we are running away with this conversation. You need to learn to use the whip.
I think Blake.
Who is the next?
I think Blake was next on the.
Oh yeah, Blake.
Yeah.
Yes.
You awake, Blake?
If we hear snores.
My wife would like to step on and switch off with me. So may I go next, even though it's out of order?
Oh yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, and that way you'll have more chance for other people who are less to speak. My story in the anthology was a little difficult to write because the ending is in somewhat questionable taste, but I felt I couldn't write any other way because I wanted to write a story that struck at the core of what it means for a man to protect a maiden, which is what I thought the anthology was about. And I had the idea of, this was my first attempt at writing an isekai story. And isekai is slightly different from stories where the hero falls through a rabbit hole and ends up in a fantasy world, because isekai stories are, in my opinion at least, you end up in a role-playing game world or a computer game world where the mechanics of how the game runs is part of the story. And so I sat there and I thought, well, what would be a good mechanism? What would be the metaphysical reason why computer games in our world would be real in some other parallel dimension? And so I invented a reason for that to happen, and it had to do with the idea that every human thought is a type of creation, and that we human beings actually have a creation power that we are not aware of, because we're made in the image and likeness of the creator. So we are all little creators ourselves, and that our works are going to be judged, and so they have to be put on display. And you can actually, and the fantasy part is that you can enter into them, and so on and so forth. But once the idea of judgment is part of the story, then the only other thing I needed was an excuse to have a bunch of female characters dressed up as Playboy bunnies or French maids, which I did manage to accomplish. But so I had the main character suffer have his comeuppance when he finds out that if you're in a game, the rules of morality don't change. In a lot of D&D games and role-playing games and computer games, you don't act the same way you'd act in real life because there's no long-term consequences for your actions. See, and you just want to have a good time, and so you can play a villain in City of Villains or what have you. And I wanted to show that maybe that's not the case, so that even in your imagination, if you commit some crime, if you lust after a woman just in your heart, that might actually be adultery. Now, I realized there might be other, figures in history who also said something like that, but they're not in the anthology, and I am. So that was my theory. And I got to say, it was a hard story to write because I don't know if the ending was appropriate or not. And I talked with Mr. LaPointe about it, and he said, go ahead. And so I'm very grateful to have been included into the anthology.
Yeah, I started the story, and probably about at the 1/3 mark was like, I hate this story. Like, this is the worst. And then by the ending, I was like, okay, yeah, this definitely belongs.
Yeah, the viewpoint character is not the hero. The hero is the guy who's named after a biblical judge. Just in case I was not being subtle enough, read over the head with an ox goad. No, he's the avenger. He's the avenger of the innocent in that story. But I did manage to I hope make it so that the game mechanics actually worked out correctly for how the victory was accomplished. So.
I think it made sense.
And that was the story behind the story. It wasn't as interesting as getting the plague and living in a tower, or or having a post-it note that was waiting for me for months. No, that's just I sat down and I wrote it because I had an idea.
I thought it was good.
Well, John, we get the impression that you're actually a professional at this.
A professional story writer. Well, before I got into science fiction, I've also been in the lawyer trade and in the newspaper profession. So I've been among the most dishonest group of liars of all history. And then I decided to, make lies about true things. So that's what storytelling is all about.
Yeah.
That's a very
I've been at it
pretty
for
way
a
to say
while,
it.
and I have like 30 books out, but I still don't make enough money to quit my day job. So I feel sad about that. So I would like all of you to go out and buy 10 copies of all my books.
Okay.
And since I wrote 30 of them, let me do the math in my head.
If you suddenly are a millionaire tomorrow, then it wasn't me. Huh?
Yeah, I didn't think so either. I was going to hire Mr. Gallagher to go around and lick the doorknobs of possible customers, and if they fall into a fever, maybe they'll go, "Hey, I really need to read a story about."
I've got those patented brand pathogens.
Yeah, there we go. COVID 3.0. COVID 20 is better than COVID 19.
It's one better.
Yeah. I wish I could remember how long it took me to write the story. I think it was relatively quickly. I think I did it in less than a week, but I don't recall.
Oh,
No, Blake.
Blake.
Oh, my wife
there?
in the background saying that I did it pretty quickly because I was done before she got started. With that, I'd like to segue to put her on so that you can actually talk to the person whose name you're looking at here.
Yep.
It was an
Thank
honor,
you so
Mr.
much
Wright.
for coming, John. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to turn off the camera for just a second. So I don't want you to get seasick when I toss the computer across the room.
Yeah, you're doing a lap version there. Yeah, I want to point out that I'm not a drunk, but I'm working toward it. This is. I was at World Market yesterday, and they had delirium tremens on sale, and well, it is the best Belgian beer. So, besides.
I have some wine upstairs. If you want to feel left out, I can go grab the bottle.
Yeah, I actually was drinking wine yesterday, which is why I didn't get the delirium tremens out the first day. We had that's not alcoholic, I don't think. That looks like coffee.
Coffee.
We are
They'll charge you alcohol prices for that. That's good.
Hey, Blake, you better.
Hey, we can hear
Yeah,
Blake.
there we go.
Hey, is that Blake's talking actually?
It is.
I tried to swap over to headphones. You'd think I'd know
Excellent.
something about technology, but that'll teach me. So hopefully I'm not echoing anymore. I've just got the volume turned
We're
down
gonna
low.
sit down here. I was looking like a ghost with like. Hi, sorry about that.
Yeah, it was the light above you. You're
Yeah, I mean, it's like I always end up sitting here for podcasts, and I think they must think I'm like 100.
It's very dramatic. No, it's good.
People should be intimidated by their editor. So
yeah, she's terrifying. Trust me. Trust me.
Hawk writes such delightful things, you know. It's always fun to read.
But I guess since Blake was up before next,
Sure.
Actually,
yeah.
after,
Like, you go ahead. I'll listen in, and then
I'm happy to take a turn whenever. It's fine.
So Blake's came in after Hawking's and before John's. Would you like to talk about it, and like particularly about like your take on the heroism?
Sure. I think that TJ had the right idea, because when I was invited to contribute, when LaPointe asked me to contribute after apparently Michael had said some things about me. Hopefully they were better than he possibly could have said any number of things, but
It was mostly true.
Mostly true. I was asked to contribute, and I think the problem is that when I was told the prompt was Swords and Maidens, I just read the first word and just stopped, because anybody who knows anything about me knows that everything's better with swords, and that's just my tagline. I've just stuck with that, and I just ran with it. And I was like, okay, so story about swords, and then I was like, oh, there needs to be a maiden in this too. And Katie, I actually read your review of the sword, which was very nice. Thank you for that. But I don't think the maiden in the story was actually. It's been so long since I read. I apologize. Fiona was my main character.
Sure, I actually thought of that too.
I don't think she was the maiden. Without going into too many spoilers, stories about a husband and wife, former adventurers, retired. And there's something that happened to the husband's sister one time. I think she was the maiden of the story, which again shows that I don't know how to read a prompt, because the story's supposed to be about a sword and a maiden. So if I immediately just get rid of one of those, you just have to run with the other one. So the story's called Three Swords. And when I'm thinking of what to write, and it has to do with swords, I cut my teeth writing fan fiction. I mean, I did that for 20 years, long before any of this stuff happened. So I never played a game of Dungeons and Dragons in my life, and I probably had 200 or 300 of the novels that I would just collect and read. So I knew all about the lore without having played anything. So I think that's where a lot of my creativity came into this. So the idea of swords and dragons and adventuring groups, and people that what happens after you go out and you save the world a few dozen times. You buy a castle and you retire somewhere, but when one of a couple isn't ready to retire and the other one is constantly trying to drag him back to say, no, let the young people go do that thing, it's time for us to settle down. Older version of the story actually had some kids that the Fiona, the main character, and her husband had, and they just weren't necessary. So I took them out, because the story's all about this couple and him wanting to go back and relive the glory days, and her saying, no, it's time to stop. So I think that is probably where the idea of this story came from, was the swords angle, and then you fit a maiden into it. And it does work that the main character is a woman, because a lot of my stories are like that. Deathbringer has a female main character. Some other books that I've done and haven't released yet have main characters. That's just what I gravitate toward. So it works that I can sort of cheat and get in the back door and say, oh, yes, there's totally a maiden story, even though that admittedly wasn't the intention when I originally wrote it.
So
good save.
With yours, with the female main character, how do you feel the message of heroism is different or the same?
When you asked this question of some people earlier, I thought about it, and the word obligation gets a really bad rap, in my opinion, but a hero is not somebody who runs off to save the day because they're good at it. A hero runs off to save the day because that's what they do. That's what people expect of them. If the story is about a couple of retired adventurers who married and he wants to go relive those glory days, and then part of the story is a family member was injured or killed or hurt in some way, he's obligated to go right that wrong. That's what honor is. That's what duty is. Stuff that Hawk was talking about earlier. Obligation is doing your duty whether you want to do it or not. The other half of that is that the main character, she's obligated to go save her man when he gets himself into trouble, as last I checked, we men are really, really good at doing. We're really good at running off to go save the day and then realizing that, oh, the day's perfectly fine. I'm the one who needs saved instead. So that is her job. Then Fiona then becomes obligated to go save her man when he's got both feet stuck in it and somebody needs to pull him out. And admittedly, in some older versions of this story, it didn't have a happy ending. Michael was kind enough to beta read this for me, and he absolutely loathed the original, because if anybody's a sucker for a bittersweet ending, it's me. You were nice enough to read Deathbringer. You apparently wrote a really long review about it, which I am still super eager to read. I haven't actually had a chance to read it yet. You want to talk about a bittersweet ending? That's all that book is. So that's my jam. That's what I do. And he hated it. And immediately I was like, okay, let's take a step back. Let's look at it. Let's say, maybe a happy ending in a book that's supposedly about heroes going off to save the fair maiden. Maybe readers might want something a little happier than the husband dying and the wife riding home to talk about, things will get better in time. People don't necessarily always want that kind of ending. So I think obligation is both a hero willing to do something they may not necessarily want to do, or doing it because it's the right, honorable thing to do, which admittedly is not a huge thing in a culture like ours anymore. But it's also a wife's obligation to go save her husband's backside when he's in the fire and somebody has to pull him out. And she doesn't even think twice about it. She's like, okay, let's go. We've got work to do. And so on and so forth.
I think that's really funny that you started out with sort of a not happy ending, because I didn't know how it was going to end. And maybe that's why, because you were building towards that more bittersweet ending, like with your original trajectory. And it ended up being a lot more satisfying, I think.
I think I was very fortunate in that it was easy to make that change. And, I don't do a lot of short fiction. I do a lot of novels. That's been my thing. Admittedly, not very good at releasing them, but I'm really good at writing them. So I have a problem where I've got a first book of this series and then, got to go start a new book of another series, a new book of another series. It's harder to change those compared to a 6,000 word short story. So when I'm told, okay, the sad ending is probably not the direction we need to go, okay, then you go back and you can change some things. And it's a lot easier on a smaller scale like that.
True. That makes a lot of sense.
Oh man, short stories are great for changing stuff up. The trick is making it have an arc. Have the, as Jaji would tell me, two things happening, make it exciting. Yeah, all this stuff. I can keep referring to Jaji. I'm going to point the correct direction this time. She's tore up more than one of my novels now. But yeah, the
should we go over to Jaji?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Talk about anyway.
Hawk does say it correctly. It's Jaji, like Jackie.
Okay.
John says it like fancy. Jaji.
John set us up.
Yeah. He actually says it like that.
We should have known.
When we were first together, he always spelled it Z-A-Z-I. I just stuck with it. That's just he doesn't call me Josh. He calls me Doll.
Well,
But
since you have not yet introduced yourself, would you just say a little bit about who you are and the other works that you've done before you talk about your work?
Dodgy Lamplighter. I teach writing, I edit, and I write books. And you can tell from Hawk that I do editing for people like Hawk. Write really cool things, and it's an honor. I have two main series. One is Prospero's children's series, which is a sequel to Shakespeare's Tempest set in the modern day. And the other is The Unexpected Enlightenment of Rachel Griffin, or I guess it's just the Books of the Unexpected Enlightenment after the first one, which is about it's really hard to describe that series. It's about a girl who goes to magic school in a world where there's no, our world has been, someone has deliberately removed all Christian, Jewish, and Muslim references from our planet. And the people at the magic school, her and her friends, begin to slowly find out that there's a greater world and that their world has had the entire memory of the whole world changed.
Yeah, that's the catch you're skipping over. It's a Harry Potter-esque.
Yeah.
But her thing is that she has perfect memory.
Yeah, so it's a world where there's normal people and like muggles and wizards. There's the unwary and the wise. But Rachel has this perfect memory, and she thinks back. She can remember things that she's not supposed to remember. So she begins to realize that the same way that the wise magic people hide from the unwary normal people, there's a whole other group of people hiding from her people. So she begins.
It is fun.
Now, how many books are in that series? Or
so there's I'm rapidly attempting to finish book 6. There will be many books by the time it's done, but book 6 ends the arc of her freshman year. So it's kind of like a season ending, as opposed to a series ending. It ties up a lot of ends, and it's a little longer. It's like 600 pages. It's a ridiculously long book. But, I'm trying to go through it and edit it. I'm like, who wrote this long book? But it's a lot of fun. And my character is kind of insanely brave some of the time.
I read the first 3 so far.
Well, I think they get better. The first 2 were a little rough. It took me a little while, both writing-wise and story-wise, to kind of figure out how to get the story going. And then they get better after 3, with 3, I think. And
I'm going to agree with you, but I don't think it's like a quality thing, right? Like, I think it's just like get more exposed to more and more of the world and more like clues about it.
One is that when I reread 1, I think the writing is just a little uneven. But the other is that it just builds. The more the more I can get away with doing. So some of it is a thing that it just works better over long term. And I've been told by several of my beta readers that book 6 is the best one yet. So I'm excited.
Oh, nice.
About it. Hopefully it'll be out before too long. But,
well, that's annoying. I might actually have to read a series, dadgummit.
Oh, it's a good one.
It's really.
I mean, I've read the first few, and I enjoyed them.
Book 6 is the most fun thing I've ever written. There's 20 chapters that take place in Dartmoor in England. It was just the most delightful thing I've ever had a chance to write. I don't know why I like that more than. I mean, I like everything I write.
Just to be annoying and talk over Jaji for a second. If you ever read her books, I don't know how she does her word choice. And I do this for a lot of authors. I'll look at just a few paragraphs and see what the words are making me feel, how they have patterns and what they don't have in patterns. And Jaji's are happy. She includes more positive words and more uplifting statements on a given page. If you're not smiling while reading, and this is her first 2, the uneven writing, I'm not sure I remember, but then I'm not exactly a pro here. But very positive. It always makes me smile to read her books, especially
one of the fun things. So when I set out to write the story, so the Unexpected Enlightenment books are based on a role-playing game. I made up the role-playing game for my 7-year-old. It was a Hogwarts role-playing game. A friend of mine borrowed it and re-envisioned it taking place 25 years after the Harry Potter books. And he ran it for a friend, and then he ran it for John and another friend and I. John and I just fell in love with this background and this whole idea. So I had to make up a whole new background for it. And one of the things I noticed was that Hogwarts is a place I'd like to go. But there's actually like hundreds of magic school books. We have a website called Fantastic Books and Where to Find Them, and we keep a list of all the magic school books. And there's many, many, many. And almost all magic school books that are not Hogwarts, kind of gothic. It's like a creepy place. So I wanted Roanoke Academy to be a place that you'd enjoy being at. You know? So I based it on St. John's, which is the college that my husband and I went to. And occasionally people will have trouble. Like they'll be going along and they'll be like, but this here, that's impossible. It's always something that's true about St. John's. The sports system at St. John's was really unique. So my editor will write, "This is not realistic."
It's not realistic at all, especially the flaming skunks. But irrelevantly,
well, the flaming skunks are not the real part. But like the school has all the sports are intramural, and alumni are allowed to go back and play anytime they want. It's like nobody would allow that, but it's true. That's the way the school works. Anyway.
Just to throw something on Blake's. Boy, the thought that you could go back and hero when you're an old guy. I do competitive sword fighting. And now that I'm an old guy and I go back and I compete, I think, wow, let's leave this to the young guys.
So speaking
Nothing
of
like stepping on a lacrosse field when you're pushing 50.
Oh,
speaking of old guys and swords.
Just die.
So when I was asked,
you come out there and you're so much smarter and you're so much better. And then about 30 seconds later, you think, do they have naps?
Obviously, that's why the story didn't work out. Is he forgot to nap before going off to fight the dragon.
Right.
Good point. I'll remember that for the sequel.
Speaking of old guys and adventuring, when I was asked to write a story about Swords and Maidens, so I have this other series, is the Prospero series, and the main character in the series is Miranda from The Tempest, but John had made up this group of characters called the Prospero family for role-playing games. So when I wrote the book, I stole his characters and I put them in the book. But I made some changes, including that one of them was an old man when the book started, because he was the one who didn't really like magic, and so he stopped taking the water that made them immortal. And when I was first asked to write a Swords and Maidens story, I've been trying to write a story about each one of the Prospero brothers and sisters, because I want to eventually do an anthology and have one for each of them. So I immediately thought, Theophrastus, he's the hero. He's the knight of the family, So I spent quite a while trying to come up with a story set in like the 1600s, in which young Theophrastus Prospero saves a maiden. And it just didn't work. Like, it was so dull, And after a while, I thought, if I made it old Theo when he's like old and crotchety and living in Vermont, and that's when the story started coming to life. And I have a trick for writing short stories. I kind of wonder if I shouldn't say what it is, because now people are gonna look at all my short stories and they're gonna seem boring. But the trick is that my main character is always wrong about something. Because if I start out with my character being just wrong about something, then I automatically have a character arc for the main character, because they find out during the story how wrong they are. So for the girl who was the main character, I thought, what if she's wrong in exactly the way I used to be wrong? Where I used to think I could do everything myself and I didn't want anybody to carry anything for me. And one day I was standing in front of a door holding a baby and I was pregnant, and a guy opened the door for me, and I thought, what have I made such a fuss about? Why aren't I grateful? somebody's helping me, you know? And I thought, what if, you know, my main character has the same kind of errors of thinking that I did when I was young, and I didn't really appreciate these things that now I really appreciate. So that's how that story came to be, with the young woman being, you know, kind of a adventurous modern girl, thinks she can do everything, and Theophrastus Prospero as an old man. And he just tries to act as an old man the way he would when he was young. And of course, he's not really physically as able, you know. And I thought that's where the real courage and bravery comes from in the story, is the fact that Theo just keeps trying to do the right thing. And he's like 400 or 500 years old, so he knows how to do things. Like, you know, he used to be a sword fighter, so he knows how to do things that the other guy who's there, who's just like a farmer, doesn't know how to do. You know, he doesn't know how to pick up a poker and knock a gun out of someone's hand, because he hasn't, you know, been in a billion sword fights. So I had a lot of fun writing that story.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your main character. Having something from the maiden's perspective was a refreshing change in the trajectory of the anthology, and I really connected with her. You know, and
tried
maybe
to make her both wrong but also likable. You know, I'm like, I mean, like she was a good person. You know,
yeah,
she just was,
like
not...
someone who wanted to be strong, you know, and thought she was going about it the right way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, her dad died, like, just trying to keep her mom going, you know, and
yeah,
it was all good things. It wasn't really, she wasn't like really off. She just, you know.
Yeah, she wasn't like girl power, rude, wrong in the way that a lot of modern female superhero types are.
But I really liked her realization that he had not been, I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but she realizes at one point that he wasn't trying to impose on her. He was trying to not impose on her. Like, you know, when he didn't want her to help him and things like that. You know, it's his way of trying to, and she just suddenly sees it in a different way. And, you know, and she begins to appreciate as time goes on that these were qualities that, you know, she hadn't appreciated as much as she should have. But it was fun, and I love Theo so much, so I was really happy to see him come on stage in his armor and his angel armor.
So you said that was the Prospero series? That would talk more about that whole family.
So the Prosperos is the basic setup for Prospero's children. Miranda, it opens about 400 or 500 years. I knew at one point, which it was after the end of the Tempest. And the premise is that Prospero did not actually drown his books. He kept them. And he got married and had kids over the 500 years. So he's got this whole family. And the Prospero family interacts with the supernatural world and tames it, so that there's less earthquakes and giant storms and things like that than there used to be, because they try to keep, you know, they make deals so that the phoenixes give the feather to the earth elementals, and the earth elementals are happy because this fills some need of theirs. So they kind of run a business called Prospero's Inc., and they get the supernatural creatures to try to be a little kinder to human beings. And they did things like, I don't remember if it was them or an earlier group. It might have been Solomon. Well, anyway, things like, you know, fire burning and oil being able to burn at a regular rate, and a lot of things that we use for our industry is something they did. They talked the, you know, creatures into doing.
Cool.
So the Prospero family for about 400 years ran this organization where they kept everything together. And then they broke up. And at the beginning of the book, Miranda does not know why they're not working together anymore. She doesn't. She was the oldest. She didn't really connect entirely that well with some of them. She really loves Theo. Theo's like her favorite brother. But Theo had left, and he didn't want anything to do with the family, which was just heartbreaking to her. So the book opens with her discovering that her father's been kidnapped by somebody called the Three Shattered Ones. And she has to travel around and try to hunt down the family and try to get them on board. And they find out their dad has been carried off alive into hell. So they have to go down to hell to get him. So that's what that series is about. And it's also full of fun. I mean, it's really humorous, like it's humor and magic, and it's told in a kind of noir detective. Miranda, when I first wrote her, was a character in a Nine Princes of Amber role-playing game. So she started out as an Amberite girl, and I rewrote her to fit better. It's funny because I have the original version of the story. In the original version of the story, she does all these things, like the little short story I wrote. By the time the book came along, she has servants who do things that she tells them to do. And about half the stuff she doesn't do herself. And I thought she came over better that way. But they each have the original Prosperos in John's game had the D&D staffs. So each Prospero has a D&D staff that I gave a different name to. The staff of transportation, the staff of transmogrification, and Theo has the staff of devastation. And I don't know if any of you have read my story in the Punching Demons Shoot the Devil anthology, but in that anthology, the blind brother is the main character, and the surprise ending is that Theo trades staffs with his blind brother, and I got to write the line, "The blind man opened fire with the most powerful handheld weapon known to man," which I really enjoyed.
It does kind of leave you at that moment going, all right, is everyone going to die now? Nuclear weapon goes off in main hallway of the rich guy. Yeah.
They were in the secret underground beautiful palace of the Illuminati is where he opens fire on the Illuminati.
Yeah.
So, and I worked on that story for so long, and I was really glad I finally had a place to sell it to. But each Prospero brother has his own staff and his own way of doing things, and this was Theo's first chance to have a story to himself.
Yeah, and what was that one? The Fistful of Demons, or what is it called? The Shoot the Devil?
Shoot the Devil, yes.
Shoot the Devil. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Get another collection.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was a fun one too. It was really neat to write for. But anyway, so that's the Prospero family, and someday I will get a good story for each of them, and then wait a while till they're all available again, and I'll put them together in one anthology of Prosperos.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, do you got more questions for us?
Well, I wanted to ask you guys, since I couldn't have everybody on, was there anything you guys wanted to say about any of the other stories?
Actually, we haven't gotten to mine
We
yet.
skipped
mine.
Oh my gosh!
Nate.
What? Well, I wasn't here for that. So
Yes.
Sat there so patiently.
He did. Just completely dropped the ball.
Now. What?
Yeah, that's all right.
I thought you guys went first. Go ahead. Go.
Well, he talked about editing the anthology and like the direction, but he didn't talk about his story.
Right. So I got about half an hour of battery left in my computer. Well, my story actually follows Mr. Wright's. It's called Azrael. It's based on just a lot of different weird things. I was reading a lot of Clark Ashton Smith at the time, and playing a lot of board games with my two oldest boys, particularly, and this might sound pretty odd, the Bloodborne board game, but I leave a lot of the more questionable like narrative and flavor text out because that's just it can be a little dark. But they've really taken to the games where you play as a hero and you fight monsters. So that was a big part of this. The story takes place in sort of a dying Earth type setting, so a lot like Awake in the Nightland. If any of you have read that, that's probably my favorite by John Seawright. So like humanity is basically living in big arcologies that are connected by roads that are illuminated by holy light, which keeps the dark eldritch horrors at bay. But the story starts out with the I think it's the first line, the princess's soul being stolen, and so the kingdom panics and deals with trying to uncover exactly what happened. And it cuts to the hero venturing forth into this horrifying no man's land to find the princess's soul and to return it. And I intentionally left out a lot of, like, you don't know his intent and like his motivation until the very end, which is a bit of a twist. Because all you really see as you're reading this is this guy who's trying to do the right thing and save this girl by going and fighting all sorts of really bizarre creatures. I don't even like this stuff just like falls out of my brain and I just type it and it sticks there.
Nate's got a knack for creatures. If after you read a few of his books, you really know he's got an imagination for that sort of thing.
He had a great little funny creature in one of the Fantastic School stories too.
There were like worms in that one. There was a creature with like eyes in its hands, I think.
That sounds like me.
Yeah.
Just take credit.
When it comes to like the weird creatures, I'm very influenced by things like John Carpenter and H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, you watch The Thing, and you kind of get an idea of how bizarre that can get. Yeah, so he goes through, fights these monsters, and tries to find the princess's soul and return it, and that's the general plot. Without giving too many spoilers on, does he succeed or, etc.
Well, it was one of my favorites, probably because of the setting being very the abomination, sort of dark, ruinous landscape. It did feel very Dark Souls to me, Bloodborne type feel. So, and I like that aesthetic. So,
well, the funny thing is, I've never played the video game, just the board game. Yeah, it's actually probably the most serious piece I've written, because usually I throw in like a lot of things that are generally pretty quirky, if not outright funny.
Yeah, there's like zero camp in this one.
Yeah, which is weird. I realized after I wrote it, like, wait a minute, I wrote something serious.
I actually, when I finished it, I went back and was like, who was this by? What the point? Because it came across very like genuinely focused, as opposed to your other stories, which are not necessarily not genuine, but are more played for humor and
well, it's how he starts it here. And I don't have it open. I was trying to think. It starts off with a declarative sentence. Hey, the princess's soul was stolen. Her body lay in state for 6 days, whatever. And, it's got a lot of confidence and a lot of direct seriousness. I like to, the standard, I suppose, is you have to understand from the start that Marley was dead. Without that, the rest of the story makes no sense. And
Yeah.
if you start off like that, you've got this view that's gonna go downhill and dark, and it gives you a little space to make a little light on the side and make fun of your main character. You doesn't do as much, but it's a short story. It's not 500 pages. Come on. So it's a good way to start it in. I like that. It's a really good entry.
Oh, thank you.
What would you say your approach to the themes of heroism and valor and such were?
I mean, it's essentially a rescue the princess story. So a bit like TJ's, but not as how do you put it?
Light,
bright and shiny.
Right.
Yeah, TJ's was he was right. It's kind of an outlier in the tone. And I probably agree with his assessment that Jaji's is probably the closest as far as that sort of lighter setting.
I was pretty cheery too. It's probably not the most cheery thing I've written, but I definitely had a cheery side to it.
This seems to have been an anthology that really sort of invited a lot of experimentation from everyone who was involved with it without anybody being told, like, hey, go nuts. It's just everybody seemed to have these like out of left field twists on everything. It's really kind of amazing.
Yeah, it really surprised me. I was expecting more stories with dragons, to be honest. I think I got 2. There's Blake's and Claire's, which you like briefly get a glimpse of her Italian dragon, and
it's not actually breathing fire; it's smoking a cigarette.
Which might have been, because that was the whole thing with that dragon, was that it smelled bad. Actually did looked into the specific creature she references. Like, oh, yep, that's yeah.
I think Blake's eating ribs.
I'm not sure, like, because I would love to hear what you guys think about some of the other stories that were in the anthology that I didn't get to talk to the authors about because they couldn't be or here or because it's too late or whatever.
Talk about his.
Sorry, who?
Did everybody get to talk about their story first?
Yes,
I believe so.
Okay, I want to make sure nobody got left out.
Yeah, I totally dropped the ball with Nathan.
No. You gotta use the whip on us a little more often.
I just like to just like throw you guys out there and be like, show readers your enthusiasm for the stuff that you do, because that kind of thing is attractive, and I'll just like poke you once in a while.
I'll tell you something. If you ever come to a convention and we can get off on a tangent for hours, they'll kick us out of the room after 55 minutes. But if John's in there, he'll move down to the cafeteria bar, whatever it is, and he'll be sitting there with 4 other people 3 hours later on a drift from that topic. I won't say the same topic. I'm sure he has drifted over time. But I mean, it's not like I have anything to say about it, because I actually went over to the gaming room, same con. We had a panel, and I'm talking to 3 people in the gaming room about how stories from this was RavenCon in
a while ago.
Okay, 2000 something, 8 years ago, something.
Something like that.
But yeah, we're over in the gaming room building story characters, and authors will talk forever. We love what we do. There's probably some author out there who hates what he does. He's so good at it. Somebody pays him $1 million. He knocks off another, $1 billion novel and sends it out, sells 100,000 copies. We're not one of those people.
It's such a joy.
No, we're not.
because you spend all your time with these characters, and somehow you're expected to be above them. Like people expect authors to be like, oh yes, I wrote this thing. And it's like, you want to sit and talk about the story like you would with someone who was a reader. Like, oh, my character, so, did this thing, But authors almost never get to talk about their characters that way, because it's just the way that things are presented, So it's always just fun to be able to just go, oh yeah, this is why I got this character to do this. And
when I was 12 years old, D&D was imaginative. 11, 12. When it came out, it was 78, something like that. It was great. Very imaginative. Now its imagination is somewhat down the pike. Amber. Oh, great stuff you could think up with Amber. Great ideas. Great. D&D had imagination like elf and dwarf and different things you could do as a core. With Amber, you're looking at character generation that includes, well, I spent 1,000 years becoming a carpenter, or anything you can imagine. So it's a completely different direction than D&D.
yeah.
And then however many games, how to murder monsters. It doesn't matter what the game is. I think that probably for every author, you dig into it and you go, this little piece, the hands with eyeballs in them, or whatever it is, this is my inspiration to do something truly different that I haven't read on the page before. Or I read this on the page, the whole concept of you read a novel or you see a TV show and you go, this would be better if this happened.
It's funny the number of writers who say that, like, reading mediocre books actually inspires them, because they read something and they're like, I could do this better. And then the book comes out of that. And what about the question though of what do you guys?
One thing.
Stories.
Actually,
I would volunteer with. Go ahead.
Actually, I wanted to make sure, before I only have like 20 minutes of battery time left on my computer. I want to make sure I promised J.D. Cohen I would talk about his story a little bit. Yes. He's also the author of Y Signal and Brutal Dreams, both which are excellent, really off the wall pulp stories.
Y Signal, such a creepy and strange book, and yet
it's so good.
It's really not like anything else.
No, I want to say, like, there's like, kids and they're doing things, so there's like that element of like kind of like the Goonies, but it's not like the Goonies at all.
Yeah. It's very hard to describe. It's a nostalgic story, but also the world's kind of turning upside down in a really unusual way. And
it doesn't fall into nostalgia bait.
It's just
talk about Judgment Sun, Nate.
Yeah, I was going to segue into Judgment Sun, which was, gosh, also hard to describe, but it's
what a story to close on too. Man.
Yeah, I think it was the perfect story to close on, and it kind of in a way bookends with yours pretty nicely too. If you look at how they both wrap up. Anyway, Judgment Sun. There's no dialogue in this one, which is really unique. The main character Orion is what I'm not even sure how to describe it. Unfortunately, JD wasn't able to get on this, but I'm not sure if he's like resurrected or what by a character known only as the Agent. And so Orion and the Agent have to go and free the souls of this planet from an evil sorcerer, and it's like they do battle against these what were they, like robot zombies of some sort. Like, it's the setting is really typically off the wall of what he wrote.
Very like it's got this heavy metal
flavor
to it, doesn't it? It's like this weird epic star-flung out there world that he's written, but it's unquestionably fantasy.
Yeah, like it's the type of story that if that story had a book cover, it would look like an 80s heavy metal album cover.
Exactly.
And I was joking on Twitter, like his story is the last one. So after you finish it, maybe it ends on a freeze frame, the credits hit, and cue Stan Bush's "Never Surrender."
Yeah, that was an amazing story. I actually really enjoyed Alexander Helene, who sadly has
he's so
gone.
good.
He's gone rather quiet on social media lately, but he's been featured on the Perry Apps website. He's the author of The Last Ancestor. Fantastic talent. His story was the supercomputers of Ra, which just to give you the sort of hook of it is a king who goes undercover as a common sellsword to try to find an acolyte that's been kidnapped into an occult cult. Just the sprinkling of a trail that goes into this much bigger story, and it is phenomenal. The world, the descriptions, the characters, everything is just so rich. It's like you can smell it almost. The way he does descriptions and just comes up with things. That story was one of my favorites of everybody who's not here. Was Supercomputers of Ra was fantastic by Alexander Helene.
I really liked how
he's fantastic.
Yeah. I really liked how the supercomputers had this veneer, maybe is a word for it, like of advanced technology without drifting into like real technology.
Right.
It was still very much fantasy. Like you have elevators, but it's not like, oh, this is some piece of our world, right? That's in this. It was like part of a more complex.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like Magitech, but not quite. More computery than Magitech.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to put a name to exactly what. It's fairly genre defying.
Yeah.
I love high tech when you can't find the circuits. And they're like, surely you know how to open a door. Sure, you just open the matrix and you examine the lattice in the matrix and you change how these. Yeah, that's all you have to do. What are you doing? Has nothing to do with anything in modern tech. It's completely in its own little bubble.
Yeah.
But I am unfortunately a scientist. It kills me to not have my technology something you can pick out and, oh, well, I was building your sword and I saw, I want my tech, but that's because I'm too much of a scientist. I try to get out of that with magic, but I'm trying to write sci-fi now.
David had a book. I wish I could remember the title of the book. It'll come back to me as soon as we're done. The story was that the young woman gets a machine that affects your dreams, and of course, it just goes awry. But the tech and the setup of the machine itself, I thought was done quite well.
Cool.
So I think there's two that we haven't talked about yet. It was one was "Crazy Like an Elf" by Declan Finn.
Yeah.
Fun. And actually, it's one along with J.D. Cohen's story. It's those two stories were originally in the now out of print Tuscany Bay planetary anthology series.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. On that, Declan Finn's story is about a guy you're not sure if he's actually an elf or if he's just crazy and thinks he's one, which is...
He's a character out of some of Declan's other books. It's the one that takes place in a hotel at Dragon Con. I think the name
it was on Stun, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was a character in that, and he claims he's the Middle Earth's greatest assassin, but Nobody can really tell. Is he an elf? Is he a crazy man? But he's an enjoyable character.
That's part of the charm of that one too, and it's basically about him. Was it Galadron protecting a astronomer? I think
Yeah,
some
she
sort
got
of
something in space that she wasn't supposed to see.
Yeah. Oh, and Declan Finn is also the author of the St. Tommy NYPD series, which is excellent. I just finished book 6. Crusader.
It stays good. It stays good. It's fun series.
Yeah, I've read the first few. I again can't get into a series, but they're top notch.
Yeah,
they're fun and they stay good, and they're basically they're thrillers, but they're thrillers with a Catholic saint twist to them.
And the book covers for the last 3 are really good, right, Mike?
Oh man, top notch, absolute best of the series, no question.
We getting a hint there?
Actually, Mike did the cover for book 10, and I did the cover for 11 and 12.
I'm not gonna lie. He told us for the longest time that 12 was like up in the air, and I was just a little bit mad when I heard that you got to do 2 and I only got to do 1.
Oh,
but man, you made some good book covers. You made some really great book covers.
Thank you.
You guys managed to get book covers that kind of look like they went with the others. And
yeah, it was nice having a template to work with.
Nice look for the series.
It was good doing all the font hunting and
I hate it when you're on book 3 and I have to change publishers and there's no possible way I'm going to get the same cover, and it's just like, okay, fine, I'm going to go buy 3 more covers, I guess.
I suppose you could have asked Kat.
I appreciate when you do get 3 new covers, because but only if I haven't bought the earlier ones, because I like everything to be matchy.
Yeah. Brand unity. That's it.
One more story.
One more story, and
yeah.
I should probably go because my battery's gonna die. That was Anne Claire's story, which
when was that?
The Gift.
I'm half asleep. The Gift. Thank you. Yes, and she's also the writer of Where Shall I Flee, and also Whom Shall I Fear. She typically just writes World War II, like historical fiction. But I tapped her to do this, and she was kind of excited to do try her hand at fantasy.
So I think she's the only person whose books you held up that I didn't edit.
Nate knows how to work people, man. He's hooked so many folks into this.
No, I didn't edit every book you held up, but I
gotta sew up some of mine. Yeah.
The Gift is about, actually, she did something very similar that you did, Jaji. That was where the main character is like very, very wrong. Except it's the male character in her case who ends up transported to World War II Italy, where he is basically forced to man up, and it's a very good character arc. And
yeah, I would have loved to pick her brain about like what she was going for with like her take on the heroism theme, because I thought it was a little bit different because of that art. Yeah. Oh, maybe I'll message her.
Well, Nate, before your laptop dies, I just wanted to say to you thank you. You
did a great
job on this. I just want to thank you for inviting me on. It was a pleasure. And it's a tremendous bit of work that I am very proud to be a part of. And if you ever want to do a sequel, I'm on board.
Oh, excellent.
If you'll have me. Let me not be too presumptuous.
Would you hold up the book again?
Anne Claire's?
No, yours.
Oh, ours.
Because that is not in the thumbnail version of this video, and it's completely like I spent way too long. Whereas David would have just been like there. Like I didn't ask him. I did it myself. in Paint 3D. So
That's a
I
real
do
nice
not have
cover.
a
I
physical
like that
version.
one a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Need to
it's
get
one
myself
that
one.
really catches the feel of the whole thing, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love the cover. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. That actually came about through a brainstorming session with Mike and TJ, because I know they're both like, oh,
Bye, Nate.
Bye.
what he was going to say, because
Oops, I have 0. Guess what his next words are.
What a great freeze frame to end that on. What he was going to say was, because way back when this was in its infancy, we were in a group chat, and he got like 3 of the guys that had some graphic design experience all together, and we were just sort of kicking ideas around. And I put a version of a cover together that I shared, and he didn't like 95% of it, but the one aspect of it that my cover had that sort of carried over was this graphic of a knight holding a sword that had a maiden reflected in the blade. And he said, okay, that's actually a really good idea. Never mind everything else. But he really honed in on the one thing that kind of
stage.
Yeah.
And
And that seems to have struck a lot of people. I hear that getting commented on a lot. So he had a really great eye for that on the cover.
There's 2 kinds of great covers. One that clearly needs editing, but has 4 million elements in it, and you find yourself digging through it for hours. And the other one is the properly edited cover.
Right.
Yeah, one element is really nice, and it strikes people. It's the point of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was striking.
But I sometimes want to do the spaceship one with 4,000 spaceships and, a whole battle scene or something that's all, it looks like a should be on the wall at a castle, with all the characters, something huge.
Like a tapestry.
Yeah, a tapestry here,
Right.
because with 4,000 characters and, all the death scenes. No. I mean, no, nobody really wants that, but I kind of do, just slightly.
Sure.
No, I had a real artist. I had an artist do Castle Brave, and I was real pleased with that. But most of the time, somebody throws something together and paint or whatever, and it's good. It's usually sufficient. The simplest one, I've got a burning skull for Bone God. It is the simplest of all of them.
And simple is kind of what rules the roost these days, when a lot of people are designing covers to stand out when they're this big on Amazon, and you're kind of scrolling by and you're trying to get some.
You want colors. You want something they can see.
Huge text. Yeah, you kind of
You
got
don't
to
want to
go
look
for
like
something.
a cartoon character,
Mm-hmm.
like something I drew. I mean, you want to look better than anything I can draw.
Yeah.
And even if I do it on paint, it looks like that. Trust me. Somehow I managed to do stick figures on paint. Don't ask how I manage it. It's really amazing.
This is not quite related, but I really feel like Castle Brave and they've had a bunch of different names. Operation Vampire books of Steve Johnson. She'd make a genre together, and if you guys can get fans, that anybody who'd like one might like the other. It's mill fantasy.
Right. I think I looked at the mill fantasy and the people who are the top 10, and none of them write mill fantasy.
Right. Yeah.
Brandon Sanderson, who does not write mill fantasy.
Do, and you both, I think you're both, enjoyable in a way that, someone who enjoyed one might enjoy the other one.
Shoot, I'm going to tell a story. I'm sorry. So you mentioned a couple of games. I do homebrew games every time. I've stopped sticking with any type of standard game, and I had a couple of college-age boys living in my house, and some other people they brought over, and they wanted a game, and I said, "Fine, make up characters." And they're like starting it out, and I'm like, "Now, you are special forces, elven rangers. Work with it. And if you have any magic items, they're standardized. Everybody can choose from them.
That's hilarious.
And
That
so,
reminds me-
And so Castle Brave was born.
and so after a while, we've got a team, and Josiah, who's by the way now actually an Army Ranger, jumps out of helicopters for a living. But his character, he's working on his sniper, and he wants the precog spell that gives you +20 to hit. And I swear the whole rest of the game, he's like, I'm aiming for his throat, called critical. I want, like, okay, you're -25. And he's like, yeah, I got it. That's 37 damage. I'm like, okay, another dead one. Spent the whole time. Of course.
It reminds me, I was once running a game. I'll try to make it super short. And the 4 players were trying to decide whether or not they were going to have a 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse team. And one of them wrote something on a chalkboard and he hit it and he said, I want us to decide if we're going to do 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse before I hold up my thing I just wrote. And they talked about it, said, okay. And he held it up and said, rock band. So they started out as a rock band for us, the Apocalypse theme. That was a lot of fun.
Okay, do you want to take us out before we hit the 2-hour mark here? Our 2-hour, 1-hour stream?
Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I love listening to you guys talk about your stories, and
God bless you.
I think that if I can provide a setting where you guys can do that in a way that doesn't drift into writing advice, that kind of thing is really interesting for readers. It's always fun to hear, oh, this story is a piece of this that I can then go and pursue, larger settings, bigger worlds, other stuff that you guys have done. And like I said, to see your guys' enthusiasm, maybe as you guys said, because it's more of a hobby and not like having to write it as a job. But
no having to worry about paying out those huge advances for us, boy.
Yeah, if you got a spare 20,000 though, I'll
sure.
And then just reminder to everybody that I did write a review on Periapsis Press for Swords and Maidens, and I've reviewed some of the other works of these guys. Not everybody. I haven't had a chance to read everybody, but quite yet. Of course, now I have with these short stories. So I encourage you guys to check it out. Check out Swords and Maidens and check out what else you guys have done, and to leave reviews after you have read them, because that's going to be a big help, not just to them, but also to other readers.
Oh yeah, leave reviews for anybody you read. Leave a review.
Thank you so much, both for your reviews and for inviting us, and thank you any listeners who read the book.
And Katie, we've never gotten to talk before. It was very nice meeting you.
Yeah, you
thank you
too.
very much for having me on.
Thank you. I really
Katie,
appreciate
if
it.
anybody wants a book, have them email us. I'm pretty sure most of us would send anybody a book.
Absolutely.
I don't want to, just standard. Send us a message and be like, yeah, sure. Here's my Amazon code. Here, have a book.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem.
All right. Thank you guys. And I think links are in description, and I'll add some more links later as well, just for ease of convenience.
Sounds good.
All right, guys, have a great night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.